Thank you.
Great.
We're clapping for you.
They're clapping for you. Well, it's such a pleasure to have the FDA Commissioner, Dr. Marty Makary, here with us today. We're especially grateful because it's been a very difficult travel day with all the weather and everything, so we're really very thankful that you braved the elements and made it through not just down to LaGuardia, but then through the streets of Manhattan to get here in time. I'll say a few words of introduction, and then we're going to launch into the conversation. Many of you know Dr. Makary, some of you don't. He's a surgeon, a public health researcher, and also an author, known for his work in healthcare policy and patient safety and medical ethics. He was confirmed with bipartisan support as a 27th U.S. Food and Drug Administration Commissioner in March of 2025, just a few short months ago, 7 months ago, almost to the day. He's a professor and a surgeon at the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine and the Carey School of Business. He's published numerous scientific articles, including on some surgical innovations, and several books, including the bestseller, The Price We Pay. His research on the policy side has focused on healthcare transparency, on affordability, and the reduction of unnecessary medical care. He was also a leading voice during the COVID-19 pandemic, advocating for a balanced, science-based approach. I thought we'd start, maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself and your career, and also how your career and your experience as a physician led you to accept the position of FDA Commissioner, and also at a high level, we'll get into the details later, but at a high level, what your aspirations are for the FDA, and what you want to accomplish both in the near term and also in the longer term.
Great. Well, great to be with you, Mark. Great to meet all of you and be here. And so I was really looking forward to this, and thank you for your flexibility with scheduling. It was a little chaotic today, but I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me. You have a great reputation, and so it's a real honor to be here, and I wish I could have been here the whole day. I got a couple of my staff here, my chief of staff, Jim Traficant, in the back. He was actually the world's first recipient of OKT3 on a compassionate use authorization from the FDA, liver transplant recipient from Johns Hopkins. And Sam Doran, who some of you may know, a New York guy, and Josh, who's one of my top special assistants, who also writes speeches for me, but I can't read them because they're so boring. But he's a great guy, he's a great guy, though. He's a great guy, and he, I can't read speeches. I got to just talk unfiltered. So I'll just share sort of openly. I was in the operating room the day before my Senate confirmation hearing, and then plunged into this whole other world. And it's been awesome. It's been great. It's been an opportunity. I've been thinking about the FDA my entire life, either using FDA devices or dreaming of better chemotherapeutic agents for my patients, or things on the cutting edge. I've always been intellectually curious, and throughout my career, in all the research I've done, it's been multidisciplinary. So I've done research with ophthalmologists and cardiac surgeons and all sorts of folks at Hopkins. And so it's really, you can't really prepare for a job like this, but I do feel like my sort of meandering and wandering in the field of medicine in research and with my experience in public health at Hopkins did help for this. Now, as a surgeon, you have to make a decision with the information at hand. You can't just kick the can down the road. And I feel a little bit like we're in that situation with a lot of the applications that we get. We have a mandate from Congress to decide whether or not the claims that a sponsor wants to make is consistent with the data they submit to us. It's a pretty straightforward mission. But sometimes it's a tough call, and I think there's a tendency just to kick the can down the road. I want to see more cures and meaningful treatments for Americans as fast as possible. I want to do it without cutting any corners on safety. And so I am very keenly aware of being in the hospital for 25 plus years, dreaming of a better therapeutic option or treatment course or device that I could offer my patients. Some of the stuff we do in medicine is amazing, and some of it's kind of barbaric, but it's the only thing we have, and it's better than the natural course of a disease. When you break bad news, I was in the field of pancreatic islet transplant surgery and pancreatic cancer, and so I've had to break bad news thousands of times. Stage 4 cancer, it's inoperable. And when you look at somebody and you're proximate to them, you want something to work. Even if there's a 1% chance it works, you want to reach for something. You don't want to create false hope. That's cruel to somebody. But you want to use science to say, is there a plausible mechanism here? Are there promising animal studies? Is it safe? Maybe if it's safe and there's an interesting mechanism and some interesting early clinical data, maybe that's the threshold. And so I'm trying to remember every day that there is an urgent need for better therapeutics. And so, look, there were ideas that have been circulating on new therapeutic approaches in many areas of medicine, and some of these ideas are amazing. And you ask, where does that stand right now? Oh, it's in stage 1 at the FDA or something. Or they're applying for an IND, or they're starting the phase 3 trial. And you just eagerly wait, and then you find out, well, the application is submitted. And you just constantly inquire. You can't keep track. There's no tracker that we have in our office. But we're constantly wondering, when can we offer something better? And it has gotten me to the point where I do question, and in this job am challenging the notion that we've come to accept that it takes 10 to 12 years for a new drug to come to market. If you have the cure for breast cancer and we have a good feeling that it's safe, do we really think that's ethical in the modern world? So we're doing everything we can to streamline care and streamline the process and modernize the agency. So that's a bit of the opportunity that we have, and we got a great team to do it with.
Well, why don't we drill down into that theme of innovation and drug development speed, and maybe pull on a few strands here. Maybe we'll start with one of your recent innovations, one of your programs. You've articulated a bold vision to reduce drug approval times from 10 to 12 months to potentially just months through your Commissioner's National Priority Voucher Program. The first wave of selected programs was, 2 weeks ago? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that. And I know on people's minds there are a number of questions. How are you approaching the criteria for national priorities? How's this going to be different from other already existing expedited pathways? How's it going to work? And also for the candidates who aren't selected, what other ways are you looking to speeding up the drug review process?
Great. So I'm really excited about this new program. But I'll be honest with you, it is one piece of that 10 to 12 year process. And we are trying to incrementally streamline and modernize the entire process. And so part of that has been our roadmap to reduce and eventually eliminate animal testing requirements. I mean, that, depending on the molecule, that can be very expensive and add 6 months or more. With monoclonal antibodies, the average number of animals is 144 chimpanzees. Computational modeling now is very mature in organ-on-a-chip technology, and we may be blocking some potential cures for humans because the animal tests are not very predictive. And if it fails animal studies, it doesn't mean it's not going to have a therapeutic benefit in humans. And in fact, many people say aspirin was that way. If we had the same animal testing requirements, we wouldn't have aspirin today. So we are following that roadmap. We're going to make more announcements, I think, in the next few weeks on specifics of which molecules will no longer have an animal testing requirement. So that's in the early phase. The phase 1, we are under intense competition from other countries, namely China. We can come up with some protectionist strategies, but ultimately the root issue is we have to be more competitive in how we intake these applications how we administer INDs, and how we review phase 1 applications. And we may need to get to a continuous trial model. You don't apply for college after each year of college. You don't reapply. You don't, oh, my freshman year, here's how it went. Here's 500 pages of detailing the first year of college, and then you get accepted to the second year, and you do it again and again. We can now, with modern technology, run more continuous trials with endpoints in the clouds that the regulators look onto. It's a longer-term project, but I think we're going to get there. On the final NDA BLA application, which is what you're referring to, we are trying a pilot. And the reason I call it a pilot is we're going to have a lot of pilots, and we've got to try new things. And in that spirit, we just started doing this. We just did it with the first medication this week. Instead of farming out the application to a dozen offices, and everybody has until 10 to 12 months to get their review in. And by the way, if that's the system, if you're expeditious or you like to work fast or hard and you get it done in 6 weeks, doesn't matter, because the other offices have until the 12-month point or 10-month point, depending on the situation. So these are workflow problems that we can fix. So in the new pilot program, we're convening people, and we're basically creating a deadline with a tumor board style meeting. And I get this idea from when we had tumor board at Johns Hopkins. Many different specialties. You had people from nutrition and genetics and all the medical specialties sitting around the table, and that was a healthy dialogue. Some of them, they had a fresh perspective. You'd even have somebody who doesn't even know that particular specialty well, but they could weigh in with something that was valuable. So we're using a multidisciplinary approach, using the primary review team, so we retain that institutional wisdom and familiarity with the application through the guidance process. And we're convening people and getting a decision out quick. Now, we reserve the right, and I've called this pilot, if we don't feel great about it, we don't feel like there's a consensus, we reserve the right to take more time. But we can get decisions out in weeks instead of a year. And so I think you're going to see that. We announced 9 products for the first batch. We're going to keep going. You'll see another announcement in the next several weeks. And so the criteria, I'm trying to think all the parts of your questions. The criteria are a product that is in line with one of our national priorities. Because if you're going to do a pilot, you have to have some way of picking the products. You can use random number generator to select products. You can, just pick the products of your friends and use cronyism. We're not doing that. Or you can have criteria and then ask the divisions at the FDA to nominate products. So that's what we chose to do. And so these are products in line with our national priorities, defined as moving manufacturing to the United States or starting manufacturing in the United States, a national security issue we don't talk enough about. Making drugs affordable, which in my opinion is a public health issue. It's an issue of access. And for companies that equalize their price with other OECD wealthy countries overseas, in line with our most favored nation status pricing initiative that the president has commissioned us to take on. That is a criteria. And a medication that meets a large unmet public health need. Now, we also included a few that address rare diseases. We wanted a diverse group, but it's not going to compete with the Pediatric Priority Review Voucher Program, which I have asked Congress to renew, and I'm optimistic that they will. That's a 6-month review. That's an important program. Eventually, I do believe there will be learnings that we can take across the entire agency. But the way that a leader fails, and I've been a hobbyist observer of failed leadership, and when you see somebody come in headstrong, and all of you are leaders, you have to run organizations. When you come in headstrong and you don't listen to people, that's a recipe for disaster. So we have socialized this to our reviewers, and we've asked them to nominate and to weigh in on the process. And I think we have a good process, and the first one went really well.
And so you think that this process could potentially be extended to many more other opportunities if the learnings support it?
I do. And if we can learn components of the process that we can extrapolate sooner, But we hope to expand this program if it's working well to achieve its goals.
You pointed out we jumped in at the final approval stage there, but you gave us some of your thoughts about the initial stages. Maybe we can continue with that theme. And your writings have emphasized the importance of randomized controlled trials and evidence-based medicine, but you're also championing faster approvals. So how do you envision maintaining the FDA's gold standard for scientific rigor while dramatically accelerating the review process?
Very important point and question. Thanks for asking it. So we, to answer the question directly, by cutting the idle time. There's a lot of idle time, and there's a lot of parts of the application where, quite frankly, no disrespect, we don't need that information. And so we are reducing some of the requirements. You just saw the announcement we had yesterday on reducing some of the major requirements with one class of medications. So we are in this pilot program offering to do the CMC review and even the inspections before the clinical trial is complete. Again, I don't know if it's going to work, but we have to try new things. We cannot become numb and just accept this broken system that we've inherited now for 50 years at the FDA that's had very little change. So we're trying to reduce that idle time, and I think we can do it. Right now you send a supplemental BLA. I think the agency wants 60 days just to tell you whether or not they're going to review it. We have to start using common sense. We have to treat each other with dignity and respect. Better communication. You're going to see an announcement coming out on that. I'm learning now what I can and can't say publicly. And so that's why I'm glad I have Josh and Sam over there.
That's right. We see you keep on glancing over there to see
I'm looking, trying to read their
giving
expressions.
thumbs up, thumbs down. That's
right. Right, yeah. Expressions on the cues on their face.
That's right. Can I pick up on the announcement you made yesterday, which I think some people have seen, but maybe many haven't? It's about biosimilars. And about accelerating the development and approval of biosimilars. Could you tell us about that, what motivated it, how you see it working in practice?
Yeah, so I love what we were able to do with that new initiative. So two things we announced yesterday. One is that we are removing the comparative study requirement for biosimilars. You look back through those comparative studies, we're not learning anything. And we can use newer techniques. We can analyze the molecule and see whether or not it is similar to the biologic. And we can use the same principles we use for small molecule generics. We don't tell a small molecule generic company, go back out and do a clinical trial. We can say that, but remember, when you don't have a biologic that's a low-cost alternative on the market, there is some risk there as well. Because biologics are amazing. They're amazing. I've seen them work wonders in the post-transplant setting and with autoimmune diseases and cancer. I think we've all been impressed with biologics. This is the exciting new era of medicine. It's 50% of the drug spend right now, by the way. Number one driver of healthcare spending growth is drug price increases. And the number one area of drug price inflation is biologics. It's not bad. They're not bad guys. It's an expensive process. You're using cell lines. That's good. But a 12-year exclusivity period is a reasonable market incentive. It does work. And so after that period, we want to see lower cost alternatives come to market. We've not been doing a good job with that. With Humira, it was 7 years. And the average time to develop a biosimilar is 5 to 8 years if you add the FDA year-long review. We believe we can get that down to 2.5 to 5 years. We can cut it in half. And that's going to allow more biologics to come to market. Now, biologics are amazing and they save lives. Some of them have incredible efficacy. But if you can't afford it, the efficacy is zero. And so it is an access issue. Affordability is directly tied to access. And so I want to see more patients have access to these medications. And so we're going to do everything we can to try to promote it. The other thing we announced is a strong position to promote interchangeability between a pharmacist and the patient around biosimilar substitution. And I do think that's a valuable thing. We want to make drugs more affordable. We want to lower drug prices and yet keep powerful incentives for new innovation.
Well, just one additional theme on the topic of speed. With the cycle of research and development, innovations being so long, so expensive, so risky. We heard today again about the many, the huge attrition when things get into the clinic, and even before that, of course. Innovators really strive to address the FDA's concerns throughout the review process to avoid any late surprises. I think people like predictability.
Yes.
And so, how is the FDA strengthening the bedrock of predictability in the review process?
Yeah, let's be honest, capital markets like predictability, and capital markets are critical for innovation and research. And so we want to provide more predictability than is currently being provided. It's not a knock on any previous person who's led the FDA, but there are areas for improvement. For example, we chose to make all of the CR letters public, and that enables drug developers to see exactly how a specific division thinks. When they're going to get your application, you can see why they've chosen to decline or accept certain products over the last year or 5 years. And so that is in the spirit of radical transparency. We are also going to make it very clear what the requirements are. We have a lot of guidance that's wishy-washy, and I think it's in that spirit of you don't have to make a decision. You can just write it kind of vague. Well, we got to be more specific, and you're going to see some very specific announcements coming out very soon on guidance. And they're going to be moving in one direction, I'll tell you right now, deregulatory in that direction. We also want to improve communication. I hear that some companies, and I was on the other side, I was on the sponsor side for a little bit, and the amount of guesswork that is expensive and takes time that is done just because you want to talk to the review team but can't. That is waste. That's waste in the system, and that's something that we can address. So you're going to see we want to do these announcements properly. I was hoping to maybe make one or two of them here today, but they're not quite teed up, and we've got a government shutdown that's going on. So it's been a little challenging the last couple weeks. God bless the staff that are coming in without a paycheck. I think we forget in medicine, if I could take an aside, in the academic ivory towers, in the world of investors and pharmaceutical companies, healthcare panels, conferences, work groups, frameworks, and all of the stuff, all of the activity that we do, we forget that 50% of America doesn't live like us. 50% of America has less than $500 of cash on hand. And 80% of America lives paycheck to paycheck. And when they get a big bill or they see that a biologic costs $250,000 a year, it can be brutal or catastrophic to their family, or they just choose not to avoid care. They choose to avoid care altogether. So that is something that I think about all the time. So we're going to have more announcements. The shutdown has been difficult, but I think you're going to see a couple announcements specifically about communication and improving communication. I did a listening tour. Some of you were there. I recognize some of the folks. Nice to see you again, Marianne. So some of the folks here were at our listening tours. 7 cities. We listened to hundreds and hundreds of folks. I told Jim Trafficant, my chief of staff, said, this would be really good for us to do. I said, I don't like to travel. I know this sounds petty, but I hate it when they tell me, oh, you have to check your bag in. The bins are full. They're outside the airplane. How do they know they're full? And so all of the hassles, right? So I don't like to travel. But Jim said, this would be good. And I thought, okay, it'd be good to meet people. But it wasn't just good for meeting people. We got so much specific, formative feedback on exact reforms, big and small, that we can do, and it was awesome. And one of them was around communication, so you'll see us making some announcements around that communication piece. It was a common theme that they had.
That's great. When we were discussing the National Priority Program, you mentioned as a priority, domestic manufacturing.
Yes.
And maybe you can tell us, I think all of us have our own ideas about this, but why you think it's important to reshore drug manufacturing and the steps you're taking to encourage this.
So for 35 years, the globalists allowed our manufacturing sector across the entire United States to get completely depleted. And the national security risk of it had been ignored, and we only saw lip service until COVID hit, when all of a sudden now we're shopping in China for medical supplies and medications. And some of the things we were short on were not even the APIs or the medications, it was the vials and syringes. And we shouldn't forget what happened, because it's a great time for manufacturing to come back to the United States. I believe interest rates are going to keep coming down. That's one of the reasons why we saw investment in different sectors in the pharmaceutical R&D space go down over the last 2.5 years. That's what the analysts tell me. More and more of the manufacturing is automated. That reduces the delta on the workforce savings when companies take their business overseas. We're seeing more and more robotics. We're seeing incentives now to bring manufacturing to the United States like we've never seen before. At the FDA, we're going to put your application at the front of the line. We're going to pre-inspect your new manufacturing facility in construction, in the construction phases, so you don't have to wait once it's done. We're going to do everything we can. The president has used tariffs as a powerful tool to bring industry back to the United States. It's working. So we're going to do everything we can to try to bring manufacturing back to the United States and stick to our mission of trying to keep drug prices as low as possible. You know, the MFN work, you've seen drug prices come down to pennies on the dollar. We announced from the Oval Office 3 weeks ago, one medication come from $243 down to $10. That's this general type of massive reduction we're seeing. And it also allows people through this new website to buy drugs direct from the maker of the drug. And so reading between the lines there, you're bypassing the PBM. Okay, now maybe some of you love PBMs charging you a ton of money to list or be the sole supplier in their formulary. But if an American wants to buy a drug directly, now they're going to have another way to do it. And so this has been a win-win.
Many people here are from industry.
By the way, the PBM is sponsoring this today.
Yeah. You've spoken about wanting the FDA to, quote, partner with industry while keeping scientific review, quote, independent of industry. So for the leaders who are here, who want to collaborate effectively with the FDA, which I know everybody here does, can you clarify what productive partnerships look like under your vision? And just as important, where should industry engage, but where should it step back?
So we want a healthier dialogue and relationship with industry. And at the same time, we have to keep that scientific review process impeccably independent. Remember, a lot of the public doesn't trust us anymore. And the FDA has been, in its history, gone through periods where it's been captured by the industry it's supposed to regulate. It's not just the FDA, it's many regulatory bodies in the government have had these periods. And so we've got to manage that independence of the scientific review. I have full confidence that our scientists are doing the right thing. I listen to the debate, and it's a very healthy, purely scientific debate. But we do want to have a new culture where the FDA is not in a receive-only mode. We shouldn't be in, I remember submitting grants to the NIH, and it was like a gotcha, like, oh, your font, doesn't match the requirements, and your margin is, too small, and I'm like, what is? I'm trying to help get, do meaningful research here. Like, what is this? I felt like I was submitting my, document to an angry librarian who, was angry I wanted to borrow a book or something. And so we want to get out of that. Let me give you an example, a specific example. New England Journal of Medicine comes out 2 weeks ago with an amazing treatment for a subgroup of kids with congenital deafness. They tried it in 12 kids. I think 3 of them had normal hearing. That's amazing. And another 7 had an improvement. I think it was about 7. And they reported these results. We're looking at these results proactively. Go to the reviewers within hours. Call the company. Issue them a national priority review voucher. What are we waiting for? We want to make sure there's no sterility or manufacturing violations. This is a gene therapy. You want to make sure there's not some blind spot that we're missing. But let's cut the idle time. So we are going proactively into the pipeline. Some of the staff at the FDA remind me frequently when I inquire, this has never been done before. The commissioner's never been down here asking these questions. And some people, may not like it, but this is the new way we're going to do things. I'm personally, and my team, going to some scientific reviewers on the front lines, and we're asking them, are you seeing anything that just gives you chills? It's so amazing, the implications of what it could mean for medicine. Are you seeing anything in animal studies, in phase 2? Are you seeing anything that looks amazing? And oftentimes the answer is not really. We're seeing a chemotherapy that might increase median survival, but there's no increase in the cure rate, something that's important to patients. But then you'll hear somebody say, yeah, there's something here that just looks really interesting. And so we're proactively going into that pipeline and calling the companies and saying, hey, can you be available for a quick back and forth? We meet, we've got questions, and then you're available to answer the questions in real time, so it's not this long, lengthy back and forth. And that's the kind of thing I have in mind when I talk about more cures for the American public and a better partnership with drug developers.
That's great. Well, you brought up trust, and you actually spoken about it quite movingly. And I think one of your quotes is that if only 40% of people trust us, then even the cure for pancreatic cancer is only 40% effective. So can you elaborate a bit more on trust? You've given us one example of what you think is important to have trust in terms of the relationship between industry and the agency. But what else? What lessons from your time maybe as a practicing surgeon? You talked about delivering bad news earlier also. What kinds of considerations inform your approach to rebuilding trust with the American people?
Well, trust is in the toilet right now. The JAMA study you may have seen from looking at trust in doctors and hospitals from 2019 to last year. I don't know if you saw this publication. It went from 71% of the public trusting us down to 40%. That's a 31-point drop. I don't know if anything has caused a 31-point drop in the past. And let's be honest, it's fueled by the echo chambers of social media and the news that enrages by just affirming what they perceive you want to hear, and the lack of listening in our society. We need to shut that off and realize we all want the same things. We all want to see a healthier population. We want to see kids without type 2 diabetes by the time they're 6 years old. We want to see kids not addicted to their phones and school lunches being healthier. We want to see the same things. We want to see neurodegenerative diseases cured. And so I think sometimes we need to rebuild trust in some novel, radical way. And I was concerned. I was outspoken during COVID. I was worried that the vaccine mandate in young, healthy children, like we had at Johns Hopkins for the students, they had to get a COVID booster or would get disenrolled and kicked out of school. I didn't like that. I thought it was going to create never-vaxxers. You cannot have an absolutism when we never even had a randomized controlled trial for the COVID booster in young, healthy individuals. And so I was worried about that absolutism. I think sometimes the right answer during COVID was, we don't know. And patients would ask me questions, hey, could this help with my cancer care? I can start, beating down on them saying, no, there's no evidence to support it. The reality is, it hasn't been studied. And maybe the honest answer is, I don't think it's going to help, but I don't know. And so we could do better, I think, by just showing humility. And maybe that comes also with our whole informed consent process.
This may or may not be related to the issue of trust, but direct-to-consumer ads.
Yes.
You have an initiative to essentially crack down on aspects of direct-to-consumer ads. Tell us your thinking there, and also, have you received any feedback from the industry on this?
Yes, yes. It's all confidential. It's all like, hey, we off the record? Can I just talk? Is anyone listening? Is any device on here? I think you should just ban these direct-to-consumer ads. These are CEOs of pharmaceutical companies. Well, we're not going to ban them because there's a First Amendment, but we do have a regulation at the FDA that says you cannot create a misleading impression, when they're continually dancing and singing, or they're, marching from some fake town to I don't know where they're going. You watch these things and you're like, okay, I give up. I'll take it. What was that side effect? Did they say sudden death in the side effect? So, raise your hand if you love watching the dancing and singing in pharmaceutical ads. I think the general consensus, by the way, for those who may be watching, I don't know if this is being recorded, but if it is, nobody raised their hand. Maybe it's just a cyber criminal watching. Nobody raised their hand. That's fine. They're all God's children. So it distorts the doctor-patient relationship. And it's like 95% of doctors believe that. Studies have shown that. And part of the problem in the United States, well, we have two problems, overtreatment and undertreatment. But by far the overtreatment problem is dominating the U.S. healthcare system, in part because of perverse incentives and short doctor visits. We've done a horrible thing to doctors in this country. We've told them, get on the treadmill, focus on billing and coding, and we're going to measure you by your throughput. What kind of life is that? That's why burnout rates, that's why we have the highest burnout rate of any profession in the modern world. And so we've got to be able to talk to patients holistically. Doctors don't like these direct-to-consumer ads. We have these regulations. You have to create a fair balance of information. You cannot create a misleading impression. They've not been enforced. In the last administration, I found out they sent out one enforcement letter in 2023, and the FDA had been increasingly lax. And last year, the department of, 45 people? More, okay, don't tell me that. They sent out 0 enforcement letters last year. By the way, it turns out it wasn't their fault. They were demoralized with orders to not do it, okay? Or highly discouraged, making their life difficult to do it, I should say. Well, a few weeks ago, we sent out 1,500 warning letters to the industry, and we sent out 108 enforcement cease and desist letters. And we're going to enforce these regulations. So I would love to see the 20 to 25% of the budget that some of these pharmaceutical companies spend on marketing diverted to lower drug prices for everyday Americans.
Rare diseases, orphan drugs. What's your vision for accelerating rare disease therapies? As you may know, the Prix Galien Awards celebrate innovations in this space, very specifically, in addition to other innovations. And how can the FDA better support the unique challenges of developing treatments for small patient populations?
Yeah. So first of all, we have to have regulatory flexibility. I remember I started practice, as a resident 28 years ago or so. I remember when we had almost nothing for rare and orphan diseases. You'd see these kids in the hospital, or even as adults, there was nothing. Just very, very few. And nobody was talking about them. You didn't have, half the drugs of the FDA that are approved for orphan drugs today. You didn't have that back then. And so we have created some powerful incentives, but we shouldn't be complacent. We need to keep going. And so we want to continue to see those incentives. I've advocated for the Pediatric Priority Review Voucher Program to get renewed by Congress. I think it will. we're going to be announcing a plausible mechanism pathway in a few weeks. That is along the lines of the baby KJ story, where we allowed a gene therapy in an infant. You can't do a study. It's a super rare. How are you going to study it? I mean, the study is doing it. And so we have to have regulatory flexibility, and we're going to keep doing that, and also use surrogate endpoints.
Right. I think that'll be music to everybody's ears here. AI, you touched on it very briefly, but how's the agency looking to incorporate AI into the review process?
So we interface with AI a lot in two ways. The way we've used AI in scientific reviews, which has been non-existent before we came there. It was all talk, frameworks and panels and conferences and guidance and just a lot of talk and no AI. So we got a very powerful AI tool that was set up by an AI genius that I brought in when we came in about 6-7 months ago. We had a couple scientific reviewers use it with their applications to organize the applications, ensure formatting, pull in literature where they could go and get directed to the original article to look at the background on a disease or treatment, prior studies. And they could ask it questions, just like you might ask Google a question, but of course this was powered with a much higher level of sophistication. So we started adding some buttons for functions that FDA reviewers would commonly perform. And the people in the pilot loved it. I mean, they were saying, gosh, this is doing in minutes what it would take me days. Just this one logistical kind of technical function. It was doing in minutes what it would normally take them days. Well, that's what we want, right? So we made it so I told the team that did this incredible project, bringing AI to the scientific review process for the first time at the FDA. I said, I want it agency-wide by June 30th. And I got that from doing a full assessment of what might be possible and setting an aggressive goal. I didn't just pull it out of a hat. And I'm proud to report we delivered AI agency-wide for all of our scientific reviewers and staff, all 16,000 employees, ahead of schedule and under budget, and they love it. And we're tracking daily users, unique daily users that use it, and it's the majority of people that are doing scientific reviews. They love it. So we're going to keep going on that. We're going to add more functionality to it, and as AI improves, we're going to give them that power. And the other piece we do is we regulate AI as medical software and in medical devices. And for that, we've been writing on stone tablets, and we're going back to the drawing board. And I think you'll see that we're going to reevaluate that entire space, and I'll leave it at that.
The previous panel also talked about the importance of choosing very specific use cases, trying them, deploying them, and then suddenly people get enthusiastic and you extend it further. We're coming to the end of our time together. Just two more questions. The first, we've talked a lot about innovative medicines, therapeutics, but as you pointed out, the F in FDA stands for food.
That's right.
And you made childhood chronic diseases and food safety a central priority, including your initiative on synthetic food dyes. Many pharmaceutical innovations aim to treat metabolic diseases. We've seen this, of course, with the incretins now and others, treating obesity, inflammatory conditions. How do you see the relationship between FDA's food regulation work and pharmaceutical innovation?
Yeah, so I think food has been a massive blind spot in American medicine. Just speaking very honestly, coming from deep in the culture of academic medicine, going through the whole process to get all the accolades you could possibly get in academic medicine, you feel like something is missing. And that is the root cause of the diseases that are skyrocketing right in front of our eyes for the first time in human history. You know, there were diseases that were rare a generation ago. Peanut allergies were ultra rare 2 generations ago. Now 10% of American kids have a food or peanut allergy. 31% of kids have insulin resistance or diabetes. 40% of kids have a chronic disease. It's not their fault. This is not a willpower problem. Think about what we do to kids. We rattle them in the middle of the night, disturbing the circadian rhythm. We hit them with a high glycemic, ultra-processed breakfast, put them on a school bus. We have them sit at a desk. We hit them again with high glycemic indices that make their insulin levels spike. Then they make it to lunch, and we pound them again. We have the dogmas, like folklore, that we need to remove the fat, the saturated fat from milk. And then what do? We add sugar. And so we hit them, and we tell them to sit still at a desk for 7 hours a day. They can't do it. They struggle. They have less natural light exposure than inmates in a federal penitentiary sometimes in some of these schools. And they're under a fluorescent light. We tell them, sit still, sit still. They can't do it. And what do? We drug them at scale. I mean, it's dark. Nobody wants this. These are our nation's children. When they're sick and sad, we are igniting an epidemic of knee replacements and cabbages and renal failure and healthcare utilization for the future. And so we want to see our nation's kids healthier. I don't think it's their fault. We have got to talk about school lunch programs as much as we talk about new insulin products. We've got to talk about the SNAP program and the new waivers that we just instituted as much as we talk about an antihypertensive. We got to talk about the quality of sleep. When we take care of somebody, we need to take care of them holistically, not just give first line after second line treatments. We've got to talk about environmental exposures that may cause cancer, not just the next chemo line to treat cancer. And so that's the exciting agenda with the NIH and CMS. We work together, and our food program is delivering on many of the promises. You know, they were talking about banning one food dye for 35 years before we got there. And 2 business days before we came to office, they did. They took action on one. Well, within weeks, we took action to remove all 9 petroleum-based food dyes from the U.S. food supply. We got commitments across the industry. We're now at the second tier level, titanium dioxide, BHT, which is banned in many countries, high fructose corn syrup. We're not banning those things. We're asking companies, and we're trying to educate the public to do the right thing. And you saw one of the largest food makers just agree to that. Walmart and Sam's Club, both in their own brand products, are taking the initiative much further. And so we're going to keep going on healthy food for children.
Great. Well, our time is coming to an end, but you have here people who are devoting their lives, working day and night to try to bring new therapies, new approaches to help patients in need. They are your partners, and I thought I'd just give you the opportunity maybe to share some closing thoughts. What messages do you want this group of people to go away with? What, again, going back to where we started, your aspirations for where you're going to take the FDA, but more importantly, where we can take healthcare in our country and this partnership that we all have.
Great. Well, all of you have taken risk in your jobs and what you're doing. There's no certainty when it comes to innovation. And so you can spend an enormous amount of time around one thing, and it may not come to fruition. And so that is something I think that is massively under-recognized, underappreciated. Even investors sometimes don't recognize the amount of sort of the soul that you put into something, not because that particular product is going to change the world, but because it has the promise of maybe doing something radical. And so we want to support that. I want to see American pharmaceutical companies thrive. I want to see pharmaceutical companies that do business in the United States thrive. We're doing everything we can that we can see. A lot of this stuff just takes time. It's hard to work in government, especially during a shutdown. But we're going to keep working hard. So keep giving us your ideas. And I just want to say thank you, and my hats are off to all of you that are doing the real work and taking the risk.
Well, please join me in thanking the Commissioner.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks so much. Yeah, great.
Thank you again.